We're going to talk about plotting points on the coordinate plane. But before we do that, I want you to take a look at two different number lines. So the first number line I'm going to show you is a horizontal number line. You've probably seen this before where you've had to plot points on it. And we're going to call this horizontal number line the x-axis. This is our 0, this is our beginning point here. Positive numbers this way, negative numbers this way. So when we're asked to plot the points x equals 5, -2, 4, 1.25, and -2.5, we're going to go ahead and find those on the number line. So our first one, x equals 5, that's just right over here. We can plot that. X equals -2, we're going this direction. Now I want you to notice that in between each of these numbers, I have a little dash, and that just represents a half. I didn't have to put that in there. I just put that in there to kind of divide my number line into even smaller portions. If I have x equals 4, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the 4 and write a dot right there. And now I have 1.25. I have a fractional part right here. That's actually the same as 1 1/4, 1 1/4. So if I look over here, I've got 1. This is 0.5. This is 1.5 or 1.5. And I want 1.25, so I'm going to go in between those two slashes, and this would be 1.25. -2.5, I'm going to use those little half slashes again. I go over to -2 and then a half more in between -2 and -3, and that is -2.5. So that's our first number line we're looking at. The next number line is going to be a vertical number line. So here's our vertical number line, and I kind of like to think of that as like a thermometer. So here we have our positive degrees, down here we have our negative degrees. You've probably seen something that looks like this, and right here we have our 0. So if we were asked to plot the points y equals 4 and -1, we could do that. We go up here to 4, for 4, y equals -1, down here to our negatives. That's a -1. Y equals -5 and 1/2. So again, you can see my little half marks in there. -5 would just be down here in our negative direction. And 1/2, I'm going to use my little half marks. Again, I did not have to make them. If it didn't exist, I would just go halfway between 0 and 1 and mark that. But since I have a little half mark, I'm going to go ahead and mark that point. And y equals -2.5. So I'm going to go down here to -2. -2.5 is the same as -2.5, in between -2 and -3 again. And I'm going to go ahead and graph that point. So now you've seen two different number lines, a horizontal one and a vertical one. When we put them together, they make a coordinate plane. They make a plane. So kind of like a whole piece of paper. We can talk about things this way, and we can also talk about things this way. Okay, so let's look at our whole entire plane, and we're going to talk about it in terms of the x-axis, which is our horizontal axis, and the y-axis. Now, right in the middle where they cross, where both of them are 0, we call that the origin. So that's the very starting place for everything. We call both the x-axis and the y-axis a coordinate plane. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as the Cartesian coordinate plane, just named after Rene Descartes, who sort of invented a way of to tell where numbers were in space. So we can use this to tell where any number is in a plane. So if we look at the x-axis, we know this way's positive on the x-axis, this way's positive on the y-axis, this way's negative on the y-axis, and negative on the x-axis. Now you'll notice it divides it into 4 different sections. Those are called quadrants, quad for 4. So quadrant 1, we name them with Roman numerals. So quadrant 1 is right here, and we go in a counterclockwise direction. So the opposite of the way a clock goes. So quadrant 1, I put a little 1 there to remind you, is right here. Quadrant 2 is over here, where we have the y-axis being positive, the x-axis being negative. That's quadrant 2. This would be quadrant 3, and this is quadrant 4, going opposite the direction of a clock or counterclockwise. Now we can use this to graph some points in our plane. So we can use our whole coordinate system to figure out where things are in a plane. So let's look at how we can do that. Now the first coordinate we're going to talk about is going to be an x coordinate. So we're going to talk about the x-axis, how far this way it is or how far this way. The second coordinate is going to be the y-axis, and you can think of it as alphabetical, x and y. But the first one tells us how far this way or this way, how far horizontally it is. The second coordinate tells us how far up and down we are located on this point. So let's look at this point right here. So when we're looking at this, we want to first look at how far horizontally this point is. So I can go over here and I can say, okay, so it looks like it's moved over 1, 2, 3, -3. So I've gone -3 on the x-axis before I can get to that point. And that's our x-coordinate. So we're going to write a -3 right here. The second coordinate is going to tell us how far up and down we are. We can see we're above, so that's going to be a positive number, and we've gone up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I made up how far the distance is between here and here, so I put a 1 right there. If I were talking about bigger numbers, I could let each of these sections represent a 10 if I wanted to, but I chose those numbers there. I don't have little half marks in like I did on my other ones. I could put them in there if I wanted to, and I could even make this be equal to a half. So I sort of chose the scale I'm going to do this on. So this coordinate point would be -3, 5. That's how I would say it. I'd say the x part first, the horizontal first, and the y, the up and down part second. So let's look at this one over here. Let's look at how far first it is on the x-axis. So if I go over here, I can see it's 5. So that's my first coordinate, so I put a 5 there. And then I also see how far down it's gone. So I can either go this way and check it out, or I can just count down here, 1, 2, 3, and that would be -3 since I'm going down on the x-axis. I'm going below this line right here, down negative to -3. So let's look at this one over here. This 2, I haven't gone anywhere on the x-axis. I haven't gone anywhere horizontally. So I'm going to call that 0, because I haven't moved either direction. And then I've gone up 2, so that would be 0, 2. Now if I look at this one over here, I've gone -4 on the x direction, on the horizontal direction, but I haven't gone up and down at all. I'm still stuck right there on the line, so I'm going to put a 0 there. And again, this is the origin, and the origin coordinate looks like 0, 0. You haven't gone anywhere in either direction.